I'm here to talk about neuro-contextual media optimization, whatever the hell that means. Essentially, we've come up with a scientific and scalable way to match media to message. In other words, matching advertisements to the programming. And all this is done using neuroscience. So we'll get to that, but let's talk about the present state of media buying in the first place. So the way it all started was all with reach and frequency. Great idea. Let's try to reach as many people as possible so that my advertising is actually producing results. Then it moved to, it evolved with different ideas that, the three-hit theory came in, that let me hit each person with the same advertising at least 3 times for it to have any effect. It further evolved into saying that, we actually need 12 observations, 12 relative observations to get 3 solid hits. So media buying has evolved all throughout the process. Why? Because media has evolved. And that was on the quantity side of things. On the quality side of things, media buying has evolved into contextual advertising. How do we do this? Well, there's a sports program on TV. Let's put a sporting goods ad in there. There's a fashion-related program on TV. Let's put a beauty brand in there. Makes total sense. But what had happened since is media has fragmented. And the cost of buying reach is increasing on a daily basis. But the way we buy contextual media is very subjective. How do we make the choice? Like I just suggested, beauty brand, let's go into a fashion-related show. Do we ever think what makes contextual advertising work and what doesn't? What proof do we have if it actually works or not? So what if I tell you that I have a perfectly scientifically valid argument to tell you why contextual advertising works sometimes and why it doesn't sometimes? What is it that makes some non-contextual advertising work in the first place? So this is the first time in history that we have a neuro measure that measures context effect. In fact, it is not the context in the traditional sense of the word, but context in the neuro sense of the word. All of what I'm going to say is statistically proven and can be used as media buying strategies for people. So how we got interested in the space in the first place was we were looking at how programs interact with advertisements. And here's a short video that I'm going to play that's going to have 2 different programs. And it's going to play the same ad in the 2 different programs. And what you're going to see is the second-by-second brain response to these things. So here it goes.
Talking about the match, start playing the blame game, and then all of a sudden Bob will nudge me, and the punches will get a little harder, and then stuff will be flying around, and the stewardess will have to come and say, "You guys okay?"
With us after the break on Nightline, world leaders gather for a nuclear summit in Washington, and John Key is penciled in for a chat with US Vice President Joe Biden. And why has Avatar director James Cameron trekked into the Amazon jungle?
Juggling too many debts? Simplify your finances with a GE Money debt consolidation loan. It's one loan with one easy monthly repayment. What's more, we'll pay out your existing debts for you. All you have to do is call GE Money. Call now on 0800 55 2211 to apply. GE Money, simplifying money matters.
Okay, so what did we notice there? We saw that the same ad was played in 2 different programs, but the engagement level in the ad were different because the initial engagement in the programs were different. Why did that happen? This is what got us interested in the whole field. But before we went on to explore this further, we were like, is this a one-time effect or does it happen every time? So we looked into our global database where we had programs and ads from Australia, New Zealand, UK, and Germany. And we saw that there was a very high correlation between program engagement and ad break engagement. So this is what got us started into thinking, what is it in the program that affects the ad? Before I move on, I'm going to talk a little bit about my company and what we do so that we all understand we're on the same page. Neuro Insight is a neuro consultancy that uses a technology called steady state topography to measure how your brain reacts to different communications. Steady-state topography measures the speed of the electrical activity in your brain. And knowing what part of your brain does what, we can then go back and come up with measures like visual attention, emotional intensity, attraction, repulsion, and most importantly, engagement and memory encoding. Our measure for engagement is a measure for a sense of personal relevance with the particular piece of media that you're watching. And memory encoding is long-term memory encoding, which is a big subset, has two subsets of implicit and explicit memory. Now, explicit memory are things that you can recall. Implicit memory are things that go into your subconscious that you cannot recall, but you base your decisions still based on implicit and explicit memories. So no traditional measures actually get to the implicit memory. We measure that as it is going into your memory. And we have actually published and validated that memory encoding actually has an effect on consumer behavior. So this is something that was published in the International Journal of Advertising about 2 years ago. It's a very cool study, so I'll talk a little bit about it. We got 198 women to come into this room, and we have 6 product categories with 3 brands in every category. We gave them each a brown bag and told them, why don't you pick a brand out of each of the 6 categories? They picked one brand, and they moved into a room where they watched a TV show. While watching a TV show, they were exposed to this advertisement for a particular brand of jam. They came out, and we told them, we're sorry, we mixed up your bags. Why don't you pick all six product categories again? And 18 of those women changed the brand of jam that they had picked initially. So our hypothesis was, well, for all these women who switched the brand of jam that they've picked, their memory encoding at the point of branding and key messages has to be higher than the rest. And that was statistically proven, and the study was then published in the International Journal of Advertising. So memory encoding, single most important factor in terms of advertising effectiveness. So we've looked at a variety of media, and we realized that each piece of media seems to have its own signature that we've called the neurostate. And the neurostate is nothing but essentially the way your brain is processing that particular piece of media, which in turn is dependent on that media itself. So the way we initially represented it was in that web form where we have all our measures, and we saw how the neurostate was mapped out. We started noticing that, say for example, in this particular case, there's a Nissan ad that has a particular neurostate map, and there's CSI New York that has a particular neurostate map. And when we matched the neurostate of the ad to the neurostate of the program, for example, in this case, 60 Minutes was a lot better fit than CSI New York, the ad was a lot more effective. So this got us interested in this field a little more. But memory encoding being the single most important factor, we decided to refine our neurostate definition to involving memory encoding only. Now, we all know left side of the brain is used for more rational processes, right, being more global processes. So looking at the left hemisphere memory encoding, we know that memory encoding in the left hemisphere is done for facts and figures and processing details. Whereas the memory encoding on the right-hand side of the brain is for the big picture things, the theme, the story. So the neurostate we now define is the difference between the right hemisphere memory encoding and the left hemisphere memory encoding. What that means is that if you have a positive number for your neurostate, that neurostate is essentially representing a program or a particular piece of media that has a global processing bias. If you have a negative number for the neurostate, that represents a media that has a detailed processing bias neurostate. And there then obviously can also be a neutral processing neurostate. So that's the story of neurostates. We've now understood what neurostates mean. So how do we use the definition of neurostates? So let's take this example. Say, for example, I dance, and I am an average dancer at that. I'm actually pretty good, but I was asked to be modest on stage. So let's say I'm an average dancer, and I dance salsa. And there are, say, about 10 people in this room who are all exceptional dancers, but dance salsa, foxtrot, waltz, whatever. So today, if I am to pick a dance partner, if I happen to pick the salsa dancer, who is exceptional, he's actually going to make me look better than I am. But if I pick a waltz dancer, and me being a salsa dancer, I'm actually going to pull him down as well. So that's the whole idea with neurostates, that if we pick a neurostate that matches the neurostate of your ad, it's going to amplify the effect. Whereas vice versa will happen if you don't match the neurostates. So we decided to do three things. First, I have to establish that the neurostate of the program is actually affecting the neurostate of the ad. Secondly, I have to establish what is the intrinsic neurostate of the ad and the program so that I can then calculate later whether the program is actually having that amplifying effect on the ad or not. And the third step is, okay, if it's having an amplifying effect, by how much is it amplified? So going through the first step, how do we figure out whether the media neurostate is affecting the neurostate of the ad? So let's watch this video. What you will see on screen is the left hemisphere memory encoding in red and the right hemisphere memory encoding in blue. And like we discussed, the difference between the two is the neurostate. So let's see how the neurostate flows from the program into the ad.
Or so I thought.
Stella.
Tony broke up with me.
I'm gonna take a shower. Make yourself at home.
Coca-Cola Zero presents The Impossible Made Possible. Coke Zero. Great Coke taste. It's possible.
So essentially what we saw was that the difference between the left and the right memory encoding, which essentially is the neurostate, flows from the program to the ad. Now you'll be like, Pranav, this is just one example. So we decided to look at a global database again, 100 programs, a few hundred ads, and all across Australia, New Zealand, England, America, and Germany. And what we saw, there was a very strong correlation between the ad break neurostate and the program neurostate. So we've established that fact. Next step is establishing the intrinsic neurostate of the media. So we figured that, like I said earlier, there are three different kinds of neurostate that can exist. There's a detailed processing bias, there's a global processing bias, and there's a neutral processing bias, which we have a normalization procedure for. And the third is, what kind of effect takes place when you match or don't match neurostates? So we did this study where we tested the same Intel commercial in three different programs that had the exact same ratings. Now, three programs with the exact same ratings, but three different neurostates. Now, Intel ads, as you know, are very detail-oriented. 2.5 gigahertz processor, this much memory, that much price. So, and when we tested that ad, that turned out to have a detailed processing bias neurostate, obviously. And then we picked these three programs with three different kinds of neurostate, and we tested the same ad in all these three programs. What we found was that when neurostates were matched detail to detail, the effectiveness was 40% higher than when the neurostates did not match. So again, this is one case. But we looked at a global database again, and in general, across the 100 programs that we had, we saw there was an, on average, 25% lift in the programs where we matched neurostates to the program to the ad. So essentially, what we've shown is that the media buyers don't need to do anything different from what they're doing now. This is an additional layer of sophistication they can add to their strategies to pick the kind of programs that they're picking. Now, this is an example of how we would make our recommendations. So we tested the Coke Zero ad, and we have a database of the neurostates of all the primetime TV shows that are on air. So when we get the ad, we can tell you where exactly in the primetime TV shows you can fit and what should be your strategy. To take advantage of the neurostate of the program, you should probably place your ad first in the ad break. But in case you are compelled to buy programs that don't fit your neurostate, then we would then recommend you to place your ad last in those ad breaks so that the program does not have effect on your advertisements. So we can help you drive your strategy that way. And this is just another example of Coke Regular being a very different execution, had a very different neurostate from Coke Zero that I showed earlier. So it has a very different set of programs that it would fit into. So this is another graphical representation of the blue line represents the global processing bias neurostate of the programs that we have in our database, and the red lines are the rational processing bias neurostate. And as soon as we test the TBC, we know where exactly it would fit into the database that we have. So basically, I just leave you with 2 points, that every piece of media has a unique signature called a neurostate, and we should take the definition of context that we use now to another level, to neuro-context, which makes a lot more sense. That's what I have. Thank you.
Richard Fielding, Kantar Media. Fascinating stuff. Question, have you tested to see whether the neurostates change after frequency? So for example, let's say if someone's seen the ad 7 times, is the neurostate exactly the same, or does it change?
It definitely changes. And that's where the beauty of neuro insight comes in. So now most other techniques in the market, say EEG or fMRI, would need 6 to 10 observations of the same ad for them to get the data from the people you're testing on. Whereas we just need one take and we have the data. So in that particular case, we can actually help you drive your strategy on how the neurostate is changing from the first observation to the second observation. And that way, say for example, your memory encoding is going up from first observation to the second one. So I can tell you, your strategy should be that you should place your ads as close to each other so the same people see it and the memory encoding will be a lot higher. Whereas if your memory encoding is going down from first observation to the second observation, I will tell you, you know what, place it once in one program and to a completely different audience in another one, because otherwise the second observation is going to take your memory encoding down in the first place. So,
okay. So it's not really a fingerprint because it changes.
It
changes
change,
over time. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Charles Kennedy, ABC. For the neurostate of the program leading into the commercial, have you tested to see if that changes from episode to episode, or is there a consistency within it or within?
Because most there are slight differences, but most programs being executed the same way have pretty much the same neurostate, and we've seen that. Yeah.
Does somebody's age affect the neurostate from what you've observed? Did you break it down by age?
We didn't break it down by age, but we usually test the neurostate on the target audience for, say, for example, the TV show or the ad. So if someone's trying to have an advertisement for a car that's targeting a certain demographic, it's usually consistent within the demographic. Yeah?
Okay, I'm Ravi from UTV.
Hi.
See, you talked about neurostate of program affecting the commercial that's immediately following it.
Sure.
But usually, I mean, that doesn't happen. Like if you want the first or the last position in an ad break, that commands a lot of premium. So usually the ad will end up before or after another advertisement. So won't the theory kind of not work, because it's not leading from the program neurostate to the advertisement, but it's leading from a neurostate of previous advertising into your advertisement?
Sure, but there's still a trickle-down effect. You have a 30-minute program and you have a 30-second ad break. So even if you're second in the ad break, that 30-minute program has still kind of determined the neurostate of the ad that was 30 seconds. So that still flows into your ad, but you're right. The second, third, and the fourth position in the ad break are going to have least effect of the neurostate. Hence, I was recommending strategies. If you have programs that you have to buy and don't match neurostates, then you're much better off placing it later in the ad break. So you're right.
Question. So does your neurostate also categorized by differences of sex, like male and female preferences? Are they different from the same program? Do they have the same neurostate, or?
Like I said, like if you're testing like in the general target demographic for a particular media, then it's usually the same. But there can definitely be differences, and totally depends on what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you want to place an ad And we have broken it down for our clients. For example, if the ad is targeting like female audience in the first place, then we can go back and look at the neurostate only for the females for the program. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, it can definitely be different, and we have done it in the past if our clients want us to like go down in that much detail.
Can you tailor an ad for a specific dimensions for the neurostate?
Can you say that? I don't get you.
For a specific ad, like when you're creating it, can you create it to fit certain dimensions?
We don't create any ads. We only test the ads that are already created.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But if they knew what went into it, could you advise?
Of course. The big portion of what we do is not just tell people that this is happening, that we also provide, like actionable insights into what you can do to make this creative work in a certain way.
Two questions.
Please.
One, you showed that line chart with dots, and it had a correlation of 0.73.
Sure.
Did you compare the outliers and why they were outliers versus why the other ones were on that line, and get any learning out of that?
Not something I have seen, but we can certainly look into it.
Okay, second question.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to use this technique with content providers, mainly people who provide print editions and then website content, and see if there's a relationship between the neural patterns of the print print delivery system versus the web delivery systems?
I don't think we have compared print versus online, but we have tested neurostates working in different mediums in general. So, for example, the particular piece of media within the web, that has an effect on the next thing you're seeing on the web. Like that neurostate flows as well. So it flows across, like within the medium. I haven't tested it across mediums like that.
Okay. Two questions as well.
Sorry.
What's the typical range of a sample size for one of these studies?
Sure. We have 50 people per cell. So yeah, that's, statistically, we don't think the laws of statistics go down the window if we're doing neuroscience. So we have a minimum cell size of 50, and we've done studies with thousands of people. Yeah,
are they the same participants recruited continually, or are they always randomly selected?
Well, they're always randomly selected, but it doesn't really make a difference if we recruit the same people anyway.
Okay. And what are participants instructed to do when they're viewing? Are they just asked to passively view? Are they asked?
They're asked to passively view, and in fact, we don't show clutter reels. We have normalizing shows, so people will watch a bunch of different shows and then don't know what content they're actually being tested on. So tested for, yeah.
How do you wire up the people?
Sure. Let me show you that our equipment consists of a kind of a shower cap that has 24 different electrodes, and we have a visor that kind of looks like sci-fi goggles. So here we have it. So on the left image, you see the electrodes, and the right side you see the goggles. And we use no liquids. People just have, these are dry electrodes and wetted with water, and people just wear these and those glasses and view whatever they're viewing.
I'm interested in your memory encoding, and one of the things I noticed is you talk about the left and right hemispheres and how they encode. It sounds to me like you've got basically semantic and episodic memory systems that are represented there. Do you ever see anything with procedural memory? Do you have a way of measuring that?
Not something I'm not the scientist behind this, but I can certainly get back to you on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see significant differences by program genre, or does one specific program genre tend to create one state?
It's actually, that's a very good question, because when I initially looked at this, I thought the genres would have a particular impact, but it's more in the execution that the neurostate lies. So I have seen programs that CSI has a very different neurostate than, say, 60 Minutes, and both are kind of like, detail-oriented shows, and grab attention in the same way, but they have very different neurostates. So it's not the genre, it's more the execution of it.